Welcome to the latest Innovation Ireland meetup, and to keep everybody right, including ourselves, I need to inform you that we're recording the event for our YouTube channel, so hopefully that works for everybody. If not, you can maybe change your name in the chat to something so nobody knows you've been, if that will work for you. For the new faces and names on the call, there are a few. The format of this is really simple. For 15-20 minutes, one of the network members will run through a topic close to their heart, and then we'll spend about the same time for open Q&A and discussion. Looking to finish up about 1:45 or 1:50 to give you time to take breath before your 2 o'clock meetings. And this week, we're going to take a look at the topic of micro-innovation. So while the headline-grabbing innovations tend to be disruptive or radical, the reality is that the much more simple stuff, the much less expensive stuff, and those ideas can have a massive impact on company change and performance. So implementing commercializing in bite-sized chunks is a really approachable way into innovation for any organization. And the concept of micro-innovation, is my understanding, has been created based around a simple premise. So I'm going to hand over now to Brian Kennedy, who's the head of digital and innovation in Explio, and is also a member of the Innovate Ireland steering group, to elaborate on this and to run through his own experiences of micro-innovation. So Brian, thanks very much for leading this today, and I'll hand over control to you.
Thanks, Charlie. Afternoon, everyone. Great to be here, and great that so many have turned up. So just give me 1 sec, and I will share my screen here. And I've gone into presenter mode, which isn't what I want, so give me 1 second, guys. That's a good start, isn't it?
It's not presenter mode on the shared screen, Brian. It's okay.
Is that any better? Can you see that?
If you do it as it was, we weren't seeing present. That's fine. We're seeing the normal presentation. Yeah.
Got it now?
Yep.
Okay, just 1 minute. Okay. Grant. Hi everyone. Sorry about that. So as Charlie said, my name is Brian Kennedy. I work for Explio, and I'm head of digital innovation. So I do anything in relation to anything to do with digital transformation and innovation. I've been 4 years in that role, but this is my first consultancy role. Prior to that, I was in internal IT, and in my last role, I was a European CIO for a Korean construction manufacturer. And this is where I came across micro-innovation and that whole concept, and I sort of built a little bit of a process around it. So I'll give you a little bit of an understanding, and I'll take you through, I suppose, a journey, and that's really what I want to do today. So, for those innovation practitioners that are out there, this might, sound true to you, and there might be areas that you are doing something similar in this, but I'm hoping that everybody, at the end of this, can take something away and maybe tweak something in their mind that possibly this is suitable for their own organization or whatever. I want to make this presentation as interactive as possible. So I'm quite happy there's not too many slides, only about 6 or 7 slides. So if people want to ask a question during it, maybe just raise your hand or put something in the chat window, and I'll try and answer it at that particular point in time. Okay, so very quickly, just going to go through a bit of a definition, the context as to where I see micro-innovation playing at the moment within organizations, give you some examples going back even to a previous life as to some of the successes I was able to get through micro-innovation, then a little bit about the process, and it is simple, some of the traditional innovation approaches as well that help you succeed within this, and a few benefits and lessons learned. Okay, so micro-innovation. So I was a CIO, and about 2015 I was kind of looking for some sort of ways that might help deliver value an awful lot quicker within the organization, and deliver new ideas within the organization. So I came across this thing called micro-innovation, and I think the first reference to it is in relation to in 2010 at a Chinese internet conference, where it was kind of mentioning about making small changes to business models, improving product functionality, or even doing simple things like could be considered micro-innovations. Then there was an article by Forbes in 2016 which was talking about micro-innovations are small but mighty changes, but they can have a huge impact, and they can also be saying, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket, look for good ideas, make sure that they produce value, and then take them to a later stage. And probably The article that had the most influence on me being a CIO was this from Gartner, and they were talking about, you know, small ideas can have a huge impact on enterprise performance, and finding that it's not an act of creative genius, but it's kind of a formula. So there's an element that you can actually follow to actually make this happen, and that's what I kind of based the whole micro innovation process on. And again, even at that stage, and this from an original deck I think I spent in 2015, it was starting to be recognized that small ideas, you know, can become an element of a competitive advantage. And it is based on this thing, micro, small, that, you know, small ideas can create a huge impact. And ideally, you're looking for these sort of breakthrough innovations, you know, where the business value far exceeds the effort that it takes to actually bring these to reality. And the most famous one that's out there is probably, you know, Amazon's one-click ordering. So I'm old enough to realize what it was like to try and buy things online in the early stages of the internet. And around 1997, you know, Amazon did something that fundamentally changed, you know, the world of e-commerce and enabled impulse buying, you know, across the globe from an online shopping experience, where they came up with this one-line order and one-click ordering functionality button within the customer experience. And they never admitted publicly as to how much, you know, effort went into this from a development perspective, but it's estimated there's probably only about a 1 month's development went into this, and yet this fundamentally changed e-commerce, you know, in the internet and online purchasing. You know, became a patent for Amazon and generated billions of revenue from it. So all organizations are kind of seeking this utopia that, you know, 1 month's development work has suddenly led to, you know, billions of revenue coming in. And despite, if that's what you might seek, but there is still a huge amount of looking at small things and then trying to bring them to reality and getting your people involved. And that's a key part of this, getting your people involved in this. And they don't have to be the latest technologies. You know, it can just be something of applying, you know, technology in a new instance. It's something that you're doing before. So I would define an innovation as something new that adds value, as simple as that. So, you know, something that changes the status quo, and that could be something in a new product or service, you know, but also could be just a continuous improvement activity, or maybe that you're doing something, you know, how you engage with your customer, you know, with your digital channels or whatever it might be, or it could be something like automating in the back office. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the latest or greatest invention. It's just something new to you in your organization. And the key part of this, and I think it's kind of similar for all innovation activities, so success is showing results quickly. It's really showing, learning quickly, and showing what's capable, and basically visually showing what's possible, rather than spending ages planning. Let's try something, prove that it works, and then actually show. So there's that sort of, success is showing results quickly. I really like this phrase, and this is kind of the context as to where, you know, micro innovation can play within an organization. So, but I think this is really key, this statement. So unless an idea is taken to reality, nothing innovative has been done. And I find that really, really powerful, you know, just because to me, what it really brings forward is this real concept of value, that it should only be the ideas of value, you know, that do actually make it and do progress even early on in this stage, that there has to be an estimate of value. Is it worthwhile at least trying to experiment in this space and learn from it? And that should fundamentally inform which ideas move forward to a certain extent. But also the key part here is that micro innovation isn't necessarily going to bring it to reality. It's going to allow you to prototype, come up with new ideas, you know, engage with the organization, present these ideas, but that's only the initial step. There would be further steps as to how to actually bring them to reality, but that is the key piece. Let's take this idea and bring it to reality, whatever that actually means. So normally micro innovations probably is an early stage to getting something into reality. So you're doing an element of learning, you're doing an element of testing, you know, you're building a prototype, and then you're showing it to people to be, and then you're kind of making a decision. Okay, well, do we know enough about this? Can we actually quickly throw this into production? You know, or do we need maybe pilot it with one particular set of customers if it's customer facing or product right? Or do we need to pilot it maybe internally within one business unit or within one function to see does it actually work before we actually progress it? So micro innovation is really about coming up with those ideas, generating some solutions to challenges, quickly building a prototype, and then showing that prototype. What have you done? Something tangible, very, very quickly to execs to get their opinion. What have we done? And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But I suppose the key piece is that this is a short space of time, and ideally you should be trying to deliver micro innovations within a 1 month to a 6-week window, so that it is really, really sharp. It is really about learning what actually works, and then presenting something that is clickable, that's something tangible to show this is what we did, this is the effort that it took. I know I'm talking quite quickly at this stage. Anyone got any questions or anything? Any springs to mind? No, that's good. So I continue then. So when I started on this journey, as I said, I was a CIO in a Korean construction manufacturer. And when I found out about micro innovation, whatever, we were saying, okay, this is really good. This sounds simple. Can we actually make this work? So I want to share 2 examples of micro innovations that made it to reality from the first session I held with my team around micro innovation. So it was a case of getting some of the leaders within the IT organization together and explaining them and getting some ideas from them as to what we could actually do. So one of the ideas was that it was 2015 and working for a construction manufacturer, and our model, go-to-market model, was very much like an automotive dealership where we'd have dealers located around the world, and they would deal with end users and end customers. So quite similar to that. And the way this would work is that, every machine that we ship to our dealerships, whether it's small little skid steer construction equipment that a landscape gardener might use, or whether or not it was a massive big 30, 40, 50 ton articulated dump truck that was used in the mines of China. Every time one of those machines arrived at a dealer yard, they had to go around and do a visual inspection to make sure that it was right. And it was a list of 30 questions. They'd give those questions, to someone in the office, and they'd upload that data into our warranty system. So one of our ideas was quite simply, well, it was 2015, surely we can do something from an automation and a digital perspective in this space. So one of the ideas that came out was, okay, surely we can. And what we found out was that we came up with and found a solution called Forms on Fire, which was quite simply a way of automating that paper based into a digital system and then automatically send it into our warranty system. So it was quite a simple solution. It was a forms engine. It worked on tablet, mobile phone, laptop, which meant that as soon as something arrived in the yard of the dealership, they would basically go around and they would update it at that particular point in time, and it worked offline, so it'd actually cache it, and if you had an internet connection, then it would send that automatically into our warranty system. And they could obviously take pictures, attach them, so if there was an actual problem. So that really changed, okay? And that sort of prototype, and we were able to quickly develop that prototype with 4 days or 8 days effort, and 4 of those days were just developing the actual prototype. We were obviously engaging with customers, engaging with warranty system, building forms, whatever. So for not as a huge amount of effort, we were able to prove that this would actually work. So we got in front of the executive team within the region, within Europe, Middle East, and showed this is what we did, and it took us 8 days effort. What do you want us to do with it? So they loved it when they saw this. Okay, this is exactly what we want to do. So then we started looking at piloted. So we did that first use case around the arrival condition report. Then we started talking about, okay, well, maybe everything that goes into this warranty system must go digitally rather than being manually typed in, etc., and automate that. So that was one example. So a very simple idea that came through a quick conversation with getting the right people in the room. Someone came up with the idea and we quickly went off and did it. We could see the value in it. Another quick example of something else that we did was, I was in a fairly complex organization, again, customer facing this was, and it was to a stage where we had 35 dealer facing systems, so a huge amount of complexity, and we had a big digital transformation program in place. And what we were going to try and do was obviously bring those 35 systems and try and obviously simplify that into 3 or 4 core dealer facing systems. That was going to take 5 years to do. Where we were at that particular point in time, if you had to order something from a parts perspective, you could have to go into 4 different systems to actually order that part. So really what we did there was, okay, could we do something that, if it's going to take us 5 years to actually deliver real improvement in our customer engagement platforms and simplify that. Okay, what could we do in the meantime? And what we came up with was an element of a chatbot, which allowed people to order online and also allowed people to check if there wasn't a part available in their own regional, distribution center, that it would check the other distribution centers around the world, check for availability and allow you to order it. So all of a sudden, we really simplified, that whole experience from a parts ordering perspective without too much effort from a prototyping perspective. And in that case, our prototype took about 23 days effort into it. Now it took us a little bit longer than 20 days effort from a duration perspective, but from an effort perspective, about a month's work was able to actually get us to a stage where we were able to go to the executive team and show the prototype that we had built. So not for too much effort. Again, here's the value we can get, and we've proved that this would work. So this is a key part of it, and I'll go into the process in a little bit more detail. The key part of it is once you've got someone to show is that you do get it in front of the decision makers in the organization. You do show it to the C-suite, and it is something tangible that they can actually see what we did, what we've learned, but you're also emphasizing the potential value. You're always talking about value. This isn't just about the tech, this is the value either for us, for our customers, and during that building of the prototype, that you're actually capturing that, you're actually seeing, can you go out, what's this going to mean from a customer perspective? It isn't just all about the actual prototype. So you bring that, into the discussion, and you're obviously looking to increase awareness across the organization. So the process, very simply, you have an ideation piece and you're trying to create an environment, where you get everyone to participate. Ideally, where I have started this previously is within the IT organization, because they have the capability to deliver prototypes without having to actually go external and look for support on this. So if there's something, if you're within that sort of group, within that IT firm, this does make it a lot easier, because then it's an allocation of resources under your control to build some prototypes. But the key thing is you need to create an element of environment where everyone can participate. There's no such thing as a bad idea, an initial focus is more towards the front office. So can we do something? Can we help the latest technology in relation to where our customer is, rather than, back office efficiency? Now you can point towards that direction and influence things that direction through decision matrix, as is okay, which ideas go forward, and put a little bit more of an emphasis on the customer facing. But you take all ideas, you take all ideas and you encourage all ideas. So if there is back office efficiency or whatever, that's fine. And if there is enough value, that's fine, okay? But the whole idea is, okay, let's get ideas first and focus on, quantity rather than quality. The quality will come, and ideally when people start on this, and when they're asked for ideas, they normally come up with ideas, that pertain to them, improvements that, oh, I'd love if you could fix this and whatever, but that's fine, and allow that to happen. But as this matures within the organization, you get a lot more value add from a customer perspective, and especially in a more mature phase of it, where you've actually brought the business into not only coming up with the ideas, but also being involved in building the prototypes, okay? So it is key that you keep refreshing, your approaches, and it's also really key that you create that environment where there is no such thing as a bad idea. So you allow people and you enable them to come up with ideas, feeling safe, no matter how stupid it might sound, but it's there, and that there is some response to those ideas, that they don't go falling down a hole. You're encouraging those ideas, and also that they might necessarily going to be, charged with implementing it, which can happen in an awful lot of organizations. You have a good idea, and all of a sudden it's added to your list of things to do. So this is another way of allowing that to fulfill. So once you're past the ideation stage, you're into that sort of proof of concept, or that, prototype build. And the way that I've started is that you normally look for a 10% resource allocation across certain people, a good mixture of people, to create one of these teams that allows you to build these prototypes. So it's a half day a week, probably over a 6-week period, to actually build the prototype, take a very agile approach, and you're constantly looking at future value. So not only are you looking at the technology and coming up with a prototype that's going to actually, you're comfortable with sharing with executives to prove that this will actually work, you're also thinking about the value and how this is going to look and how this might be rolled out across the organization. And the third part is really, once you have that prototype, is that you go and you talk to the execs. And it's really important that it's demo, it's something clickable, it's something tangible. It's not a PowerPoint deck, it's actually an app, or it's something that they can actually do and see, and says, okay, they immediately get a sense of what this is going to look like in the future. you've got that sort of high-level business case, and you're proposing next steps. And the next steps, probably there's three things. Like, if we want to pilot this, we're not 100% sure, do we want to actually go with the particular, business unit or department or whatever. You might say, okay, this is good, let's just roll this out. And you would use the existing PMO or project delivery process. You're not going to use this, to roll it out, the existing micro innovation process, because there might be a totally different set of behaviors and skills needed to do that. Or you might just pause and say, okay, this isn't right for us at this particular point in time. And there's a few decision points here, which is really key. So after as part of the ideation, it's okay, well, which ideas are we going to build prototypes? And again, you're going back to, okay, which of the most value, okay? And one of the things that we really focus on, and one of the metrics, is that we believe, and this is where the small ideas come in, that we can come up with some sort of clickable prototype within 20 days effort. And that's the kind of rough governance, okay? So you're thinking about, okay, within 20 days effort amongst this team that's got a 10% time allocation, can we build a prototype? And that's kind of been asked very early on, okay, what do we actually think? And there's no right answer, and common sense comes in here a little bit, but that's one of the key criteria. It's also another criteria around the value. What value is this for us, or does this allow us to play with the latest technology? Is it aligned to us? So you start coming up with a list of, decision criteria in order to decide, which of these ideas go forward to be built from a prototype perspective. But a lot of it is driven by value, okay? And ideally, you actually allow the team itself that you've actually assembled, or within group sessions, group ideation, to decide themselves. You're trying to empower them to self within loose governance, that they come up with the ideas. Now, you'd probably have an element of a checkpoint there with the innovation team to make sure that, okay, this makes sense, okay, go ahead with that. So that's one of the early decision points, which is key in it. And obviously the second decision point is really, well, once you've presented to the exec, what happens next? So in summary, really around the process, it is very lightweight process with boundaries, okay? Time is, 20 days effort max. Do we think we can do it within? If you need some budget, to actually, get a demo, or you need to buy some pieces off, just ask for it. So there's an element of asking about it. And you're really trying to turn this around in, 2 to 3 2-week sprints. That's really where you're trying to get to actually build the prototype and come up with something tangible that you can share. So if we look at approaches, to succeed, and what I've actually used is, again, it's a combination of, design thinking, if that's actually relevant. So always look at this from a customer perspective, and always look at it from a value perspective, if that's relevant. Lean startup is a no-brainer here. What are we going to actually build in the prototype? What do we need to build so we can measure what works, and what do we need to learn to? So it's very much MVP. You're trying to eliminate waste, but you are using lean startup approach to actually build the prototype, and then to actually deliver it within that, you're using an agile approach. And it's probably not Scrum. Scrum is a little bit too formal. It's more or less just Kanban stuff, really, really quick, work in progress to do, and you got a product backlog. So it's that simple. It's really around going back to that success is showing results quickly rather than doing the right planning. So you're using design thinking, lean startup, how might we, agile delivery. So existing innovation approaches that are out there are bundled and are used within this process in order to deliver it. Any questions? Or hopefully I'm still on. It's quiet. I don't know. Hopefully I'm still on. Yeah,
you're still on, Brian.
Okay.
You're still on, Brian. I mean, are you ready to open up to questions, or do you have more to
I think I have one or two more very quick slides.
Okay. Well, do you want to come back to them? I can take a couple of questions first.
Yep. Take
okay.
A couple of questions.
I've one which then I'll lead into Shane, if that's okay. So in the case of the Amazon OneClick and the heavy plant inspections using sort of forms on fire, micro innovation seems to kind of relate or equate to incremental innovation, albeit with a very high impact. Incremental innovation gets a really bad press. It's not real innovation. It's not blue sky thinking. I think it's unfounded, but that's a different question because it can still have real value. So is micro innovation equals incremental fair, or can you use it to develop completely new products and address new markets?
Yeah, I would say the latter. You can use it for whatever way you want, and where I've started to use it on client sites, a fair amount is Derisk the introduction of new technologies, within organizations. Say, okay, maybe we want to look at something in relation to robotics or RPA or something along those lines. So we want to actually, use that and say, okay, well, let's try that from a micro innovation perspective. Let's build a prototype with RPA. Where does this actually work? But, you can actually see, from a customer design perspective, can we do something with a digital channel? So I think it can be anything you want it to be. I wouldn't, I wouldn't pigeonhole it into, oh, it's only for incremental, because I've seen in other instances where they've actually used it for new products and services as well. Then again, when you're doing it in that space, and you're not necessarily part of the R&D or the normal innovation team, you want to be fairly careful that you're not seen to be, competing or stepping on those toes. So again, it kind of depends on your organizational circumstance, but I wouldn't necessarily tie it just for incremental innovation. It can be anything you want it to be.
Okay, that's great. Shane, you were up very, very quick with your hand there, so I'll
always pick my hand up, Charlie. Sorry about that. Yeah, just quick question for you, Brian. And there's an assumption behind this. You were talking about maximizing business value for minimal effort.
Yeah.
My assumption is the value cannot really be known until the innovation is actually deployed. So I'm just wondering how you approach measuring or estimating the value when you're evaluating ideas before you move into deployment, given that you can't actually know until you make it.
Exactly, like it is that sort of, it's an informal piece, to a certain extent. It's not necessarily scientific. That there's an element of, our objective. It is trying to estimate at that particular point of time based on the knowledge that we have. So, and you're right, even when you bring something to a prototype, it hasn't been realized. So it is actually, the value is only going to be realized, but you're constantly thinking of, okay, where's the potential? Where can we actually do? And having conversations with the organization, our customers, like, okay, so you're taking that sort of design thinking, customer-centric approach, that you've brought them into the conversation, and even if it's only one or two close, I can see where we can do this. So in one of the financial services clients, they were looking at chatbots and RPA, and there was that approach taken through it, that by the end of the prototype build, they had a clear idea and a roadmap as to actually how they could actually implement this project and where else this would be applicable within the organization. So I think it depends on the individual idea, and there needs to be an element of a health check based on our understanding and estimate. This is the value we believe, or the potential value we believe, if we adopt that. I don't know if that helps answer the question to a certain extent, but it is trying to be, you're estimating, you're learning as you go along, and it's similar. It is that sort of experimentation piece. You're learning as you go, and as you learn more new information, then you basically are able to surface that and bring that to a certain sense. So it is that kind of, starts off at a very high assumption, and you're trying to prove that as you go along, even through the prototyping stage. Because get to a stage, if you're getting in front of execs, you want to have your story straight, and you want to have some level of confidence that this is the future value that you're going to get from.
So just to play that back to you, what I think you're saying is that really the point is you have to estimate the value, but the point is to focus on value as the thing you're estimating, rather than, do I like it? Or
oh, this looks great.
I would like to achieve, or, can we all step back and say, where do we think is the most value in these ideas? Yeah, good. That makes sense.
Excellent. Good. Well put. Thank you. Gar, sorry, Brian, we've got a few questions. We've got Gar, Owen, and Catherine. So we'll go in that order, and then we'll let you finish off your presentation, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Gar.
So, quick question on I've got two that I'll wrap together, and they're very different. So one is on scaling and coordinating. So in a very big distributed organization, I'm doing stuff in the HSE, which is, it's big and distributed, so I can see where this fits, but it loses coherence. In that, if you've got lots of things, it's like a million flowers bloom. They're blooming everywhere, but they end up lacking coherence, and it doesn't really fit into anything overall. In that, it's not driving. They just become these disconnected pieces, and operationally, you can't transition them into something that you can support then, as it moves up the stack, as it moves through. So, interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is a challenge. So how I've scaled this. And the messaging I give around this is that there's probably 3 phases within it. Okay, so the first phase is where you do it within a particular part of the organization. Ideally, technology delivery of IT, so where you can actually you can actually build those prototypes that are within your control. Once you've proved that works to the organization, then you open it up to other parts of the organization, so the business part. So you get them involved in the ideas, and you also start bringing them into, this 10% allocation. So therefore, and you go through the same process. So you're getting more ideas from the business. They're more involved in building the prototypes, and they're involved in the exec review to a certain extent. Once you prove that that works, okay, and again, you can do this. I'm a big fan of starting small and learn as you go along and scale as you go along. Then once you get to that stage, you're sort of saying, okay, are we going to make a real commitment to this? And this is the last phase. And really what you're trying to do is, okay, we've had 10% allocations from this. We've now got an innovation team that controls this, okay? Now what are we going to do around building the prototypes? And what I've, tried with clients to some success is that, you take people from the organization and you put them on 6 months secondments into this sort of team that's building the prototypes, okay? So it becomes full-time. You've got some element of, idea capture at the front end, where you might even be starting to bring your customers in, or suppliers into some of those ideas as well. So you're actually building something. And if you think about it, you've actually built an innovation lab to a certain extent, in that you've actually built capacity and you've built resources that are going to be delivering prototypes and experimenting as quick as possible. So that is an element of that. Now, how you roll that out across the organization, there does need to be that organizational commitment to say someone is in charge of this and is accountable for this. Too many times I see that sort of innovation theater where you're given the innovation role, as well as your other role, to a certain, so it's added on to you. You really have to commit to this. So you have an innovation team. You definitely need some sort of technology to drive innovation activities, across the organization. You need to be changing. You need to maybe focus away from general buckets, sort of mixing it up where you actually are looking for challenges. So you're looking for solutions. You're submitting challenges through a technology portal to say, okay, and you're trying to capture all those ideas from the organization. So really what you're trying to get to is get to a stage where you've got an innovation lab where you've proved that an awful lot of things are working, and then you're passing it off to that sort of PMO process, that existing project delivery process. So you've separated it. The micro innovation piece isn't going to be delivering it into reality. It's going to prove that it works. It's going to be able to demonstrate the value that there is. But then you need to hand it over to the normal delivery part of the organization. And that's how you're kind of scaling it, to a certain extent.
It's helping. And it's helping to build the business case then for
constantly. You're constantly having to build, but showing results quickly, and showing them what's possible, and getting people, okay, this is it, because what you're really looking for is an element of a new way of working to it, and a simple case. And one of the, I suppose, the big benefits of this is it's an opportunity cost. It's really around resource allocation and a new way of working, and a new way of trying to surface and get these ideas to reality. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
That's great. I'll pass on my second question, just give everybody else a chance. I might come back.
That's very good of you, Gar. I was just about to say, can we come back to yours if we get the second one if we get a chance? Owen, I think you're next.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Honest. This is going back to the start, Brian. This is about the definition. So what qualifies, or what are the limits, the boundaries, micro innovation? It's small effort, or it's small change, or small something else, or it's small effort and small change. What are the boundaries or limits of what's micro innovation?
The only boundary I've put on it, so it could be a technology piece, it could be a process improvement piece. It's again, accept any ideas. So the real boundary that I put on it is that sort of 20-day effort for the proof of concept. Like someone could turn around and say, oh, we need a new CRM system, and it says, well, that's great. Yeah, we know we need a new. This is how we're going to engage better with our clients. But I know, and everyone else knows, that we're not going to be able to prototype a CRM within 20 days effort. So that sort of helps those sort of bigger ideas be pushed. Okay, there's a different way to deliver it. So to me, again, I'm not trying to limit what the ideas are, or whether it's a small change or whether it's a technology change. It's really the main limit that kind of drives what a micro innovation is do we have a level of confidence that we can come up with some prototype within 20 days effort? That's the only real limit that I put on micro innovation.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Great stuff, thank you. Catherine, if we come to you, and then Kieran's just put the hand up, but I'll come back to Kieran after.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I had a question about budget. And insofar as, you said it's a small 8-day effort, €200, but then there's a piece about, the equivalent of mitching school. It's the cost of what you were supposed to be doing. So how was the culture in that organization you mentioned about saying, listen, you've 10% to play with, because there's your day job and then there's micro innovation?
So when I was selling this internally in my previous life, there was two things I did. So the first demo that I did was of something that the execs wanted. So we had been struggling with presenting them, you know, a nice, easy drill down dashboard. And I was able to go and say, okay, we've actually, within our own product set, we spent 4 days effort, and I showed them something that they wanted. So drill down, all of a sudden, they weren't seeing lists, you know, of financial numbers. They're actually seeing visual graphs, actually seeing visual, you know, geographical locations. They could drill down and get sales figures exactly. So that was, I gave them something that they wanted. Okay, so that was really key. And the second piece is that I went with a message around how to create that capacity, how to create that 10% for certain people in the actual, you know, so they could participate in it, because it is an opportunity cost. But at some stage, you know, do we want to do this or do we not want to do it? So I actually had a story around how we would create some capacity within the IT function in order for us to enable this next 3 months effort, and we'll come back and we'll show you what we did. And so the two examples that I gave earlier were the examples that we went back to. So we had that, you know, that forms on fire and that chatbot that sat in front, you know. So they were the two examples, you know, that we actually used, and it was the opportunity cost. But we messaged and we came up with a resourcing model that freed up some capacity, which basically was saying, okay, we're not going to do some work in a certain area for 3 months. Are you guys okay with it? There's not too much value add. Because what you're trying to say when you're trying to get buy into something like this is, okay, you know, this is about allocating 10% of certain people's time, you know, to more value add activities, which is the innovation. So I went with a story to free capacity at the same time, Catherine.
Right.
Excellent, thank you. Brian, I don't know how many slides you've left.
Yeah, I've only one left, so maybe if I do that and then I can stop share and I can have a look at a few faces.
Okay, yeah, do that, and then we'll come back to Kieran's question.
Yeah. So very quickly, the last slide is just a little bit around benefits and lessons, and I'll just quickly fly down through it, you know. So I think I'm always blown away by the amount of creativity that are in, you know, people's heads in organizations, and it's untapped, and micro innovation, I think, helps harness that. Okay, so it helps harness that, and people have ideas but they don't know what they do with it, you know, and they do want to help organizations. So this allows that to actually happen, you know, and there's numerous other ways of doing it as well, but I found that this actually does work. You know, it is low cost, back to Catherine's point, but it is an opportunity cost. So are you, you know, as an executive, are you willing to invest some time, you know, in resource allocation in this? Definitely helps improve employee engagement, you know, and as I previously mentioned, it could be a way, and it is used as a way of de-risking the introduction of new technologies into the organization, and helps foster that sort of agile digital mindset, builds a collaborative culture. You know, it helps build a culture of innovation within the organization. And especially so, you know, I'm working with a client at the moment, and we went through this process around the ideation. So you get out in front of people. This isn't something that you launch, you know, by email. You get out in front of people, you tell what's coming, but you do give them, you know, an opportunity to reply to email. Then we do some group ideation sessions where you get together. Anyway, at the end of this, we had about 80 ideas. Okay, and some of them were really, really good, but we chose 2 top ideas to move forward. Okay, but in fairness to this organization, they see this as a start to creating a culture of idea. So they got in touch with every single one of the 80+ people whose idea wasn't chosen and said, okay, we really thank you first. Maybe this is the right way to look at it in the future. So there's an element of engagement. So next time the ask is out there for ideas, people say, well, I know my idea didn't happen this time, but it will the next time. So you're really trying to build that culture and let people know at the bottom up, you know, that they have a say in what can be done from a technology perspective into the future. And very quickly, lessons learned. It is about, you know, you need to reinvent. You can't just go for general buckets, maybe looking at, you know, of ideas. We've got some specific challenges. Anyone got ideas as to how we might actually solve this? You know, you might then sort of say, let's go talk to one particular department, you know, customer service, you know, where are some of their pain points at this stage? And you take some of those ideas in and bring them through the prototyping phase. So your ideation phase could actually be going out and engaging with different functions or with your customer or whatever it is, and bring, so you're constantly trying to do it. You know, maybe getting ideas from hackathons, design sprints, whatever it is, you know, can you bring elements of them through this process? So constantly reinvent to keep it fresh. I think a platform is really important at some stage so that you'd actually communicate rather than via email and allow people to go in and see what's going on, helps the visual aspect of it. You know, my second piece there on lessons learned is, you know, once it extends outside of IT, you know, most of the ideas should be coming from the business. If not, there's something wrong. So basically be conscious of that and make sure you're getting the right engagement from the business. You know, weighing the scoring, the decision matrix, you know, in front office innovations. I think that helps. You know, it's all about the customer. You know, you're looking at it from a customer value perspective, but don't discount all the great stuff you can do from the back office efficiency, but maybe put in more of an emphasis around the customer. You know, I think there's more opportunities for micro innovation and automation, you know, in the front office rather than there is in the back office. You know, and again, going back to the C-suite, make them believe what's possible, not only by what you're actually showing them, but the potential future value. And again, allocating some time. It's not the whole organization. If you're taking people in from the organization and it's become a full-time effort, they're there for 6 months, then they go back to the original role. You're getting different people in, but when they're back in there, you make them innovation champions. Help them gather help them to gather challenges, you know, that they're aware of, and feed them into the process as well. So,
good stuff. Thank you very much, Brian. Kieran, you've had your hand up patiently for a while.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Brian, for your very interesting talk. I was just wondering, it's always useful, I suppose, to consider the starting point. In fairness, you touched upon it there in the last slide or two. The starting point around ideating for innovation. Is the starting point ideation, or is it problem scouting? And to what degree, you know, should you have an understanding of the problems to ensure that you're ideating around a problem that's worth solving?
I think there's a combination of both. You know, what I normally have done at the start is it's that general bucket of ideas, so that we accept all ideas, so that you're trying to create and you're trying to get people that are going to submit some ideas to believe, okay, you want to unlock their creativity. But fairly soon after doing that general buckets, then you're sort of going more towards the challenge, because for more focused ideation, you know, it is around, okay, have you got some possible, you know, so can you think of possible solutions to this challenge that we have? So it's a combination of both, you know, and I think for more focused and for more value-driven activities, you know, and for I suppose better possible solutions, it is around that problem statement piece and that challenge piece. But then again, if you focus on that as the starting point, you're not necessarily going to get all those guys that have got ideas and they want to submit stuff. So you're not necessarily getting the employee engagement piece. So I would normally always start with the general bucket of ideas, make them feel safe. You know, okay, there's no such thing as a bad idea. And once you've done a few iterations of then start pointing it. Okay, the general bucket's already there, you know, and we might necessarily be doing group, you know, sessions around ideation, but we might do group ideation sessions around, okay, can we come up with some challenges? Can we come up with some possible solutions to this challenge? So it's like you're keeping, but I always think start with the general bucket, because that gets people involved and gets them thinking, oh, maybe they can solve this idea that's been annoying me for 5 years and it's been impacting, you know, on my ability. So that's kind of the way that I would recommend going about it.
Yeah. I mean, some companies have put off with you know, throwing it out there to all of their employees because they're fearful of being snowed under with ideas, where they have to, you know, do exactly what you just said there. You have to go back to everyone to ensure that the circle is squared all the time. And sometimes if you put some kind of a criteria around it, you know, even just fairly loose criteria, it allows you to filter and allows your employees to focus a little bit more, so that you're getting ideas that are manageable, or a number of ideas that are manageable.
So what we've done as well is, you know, and it goes back to the decision matrix, that's the importance of it, that fairly early on, you know, after the ideation, which ideas are valuable, most valuable, is that we've actually brought that into part of the group ideation session, which would be facilitated by an innovation team, but get them to actually decide which ideas are of most value. And you can have, you know, a checkpoint there to make sure, well, actually, you know, I think we might understand that maybe we need to have a look at, but you're trying to get that sort of team and that sort of engagement from employees. Not only do they decide, you know, to come up with those ideas, but they also decide which ideas go forward as well. So there's no hard and fast way of doing it to a certain, and I think that's the right way to do it, is as you learn what works for your organization, how do you keep tweaking it?
I think your point is very fair, Kieran. And if you don't feed back, if you overwhelm yourselves and don't feed back, next time you ask people for their input, they go, well, you didn't bother coming back to me last time. I submitted all these ideas, nobody said anything, can't be bothered.
Well, it goes back to that
so,
culture piece, that culture of innovation where you're encouraging and supporting all employees to submit their best thoughts, and something happens, and whether or not that something happens is okay, I actually have to go back to do that. But as soon as, if you start bringing in platform, you can automate that response and things like that. So there are things that can help you as you scale.
Okay, I'm very conscious that we're at 10:02, and I said we'll be finished by about 10:02. There's some interesting chat going on, some more questions coming in through that as well. So I would suggest that maybe people have a read through before they sign off. If there's one more burning question, if anybody has one, otherwise I shall start to wrap up. Okay, I'll use my burning question then. This approach it feels to me like an easier sell into the enterprise because there's a fixed price, there's a fixed duration to a certain extent. But I would have a fear that organizations might get stuck doing this kind of thing, and operating just using ad hoc activities or innovating tactically, if you like. Is it a good way into innovation for an organization, or does it need to be done within the context of a wider innovation strategy?
Yeah, I would think that this should be done as part of a wide, if you have an innovation strategy, this should be part of it, from a bottom-up perspective, as well as obviously your top-down activities and whatever you would consider that would go through traditional R&D or whatever that might be. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any right answer here to a certain extent.
That's the challenge.
That is the challenge. It's what works for you. I think if you haven't been doing any of these activities within your organization, I think it's a nice way to start. And if you have an innovation, you should be incorporating elements of this. And I think most organizations are. They mightn't necessarily be choosing, that simple an approach, or but I mean, I don't think it's rocket science to a certain extent, but it's about getting the good ideas, quickly choosing which ones, but quickly developing something that shows that this idea works, and then showing it to the people in power. So that's kind of what you're trying to get to, and say, listen, isn't this a much better way that we spend an element of our time doing it like this, rather than the traditional where we've spent ages planning and actually what we developed wasn't what we thought we'd get in the first place. Try and learn that as quickly as possible. So it's just taking the standard innovation approaches and just applying it, slightly differently.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. I'm just sharing, hopefully sharing a screen there. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, the connection. Thank you. So just to wrap up, thank you, Brian, and to everybody as ever for sort of joining us today. Very interesting discussion. It's something that I felt I kind of knew, but I've still learned from it. So that's always good to see. We've nothing in the diary for next week. It's Easter, so we're giving everybody their Friday lunchtime back. On the 9th, Owen is taking us through current thinking on idea management. Looking at his face, he has remembered. I didn't know if I was throwing that at him there. 16th of April, Claire Dillon is going to be talking to us about the impact of open source models on innovation, which would be a great one. I've seen a talk on the subject before. Don't forget, all of our events are in the published calendar. So if you go to the website, innovateireland.net, you can access the calendar. If anybody has subscribed to the calendar, which is something I suggested probably about a month ago, forget it. The updates are not getting through. So don't rely on that. Go to the website and look at the current calendar all the time. So finally, thanks to everybody for coming along today. Great discussion, great points. Big thank you to Brian for leading it today.
Well done, Brian.
Have a great Easter, everybody. And
thanks, everyone.
Well, we'll see you on the.
Hopefully, you got something out of it. Cheers.
Definitely.
Cheers, Charlie. Have a great Easter. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.